Hi, and welcome to another newspaper article, Lucky Dip. This will be episode 14 of season 2. Before getting into them, those that caught the last episode may have heard that there was the audio was slightly weird. My main mic has been something a wee bit dodgy of late. I'm not entirely sure what's changed. So I have unplugged everything, replugged everything, in the hopes that maybe that does a thing. But we're also going to run with a second mic this time around, just in the off chance, because the sound has this odd quality to it. Okay. The other device that I'm going to be using for audio, because my normal mic has been really acting up. That took me hours of editing the last time in a bid to try and make it more audible. Hopefully we're going to be able to skip that part of the editing this time around. We'll see how it goes. We're going to steal Yvette's hat. Thank you, Yvette. And we'll just jump into this. Now, in the last episode, it had been a wee while, and we did just get straight into the articles. I forgot to give the usual trigger warning. Unfortunately, the gods were smiling upon us, for there were no trigger warning worthy articles that came out of the hat. Thank goodness. But if you are sensitive to any type of situation, if any situation you can think of distresses you to hear about, have a look in the description. Cover yourself, because I don't know what's coming out of the hat. It'll be put in the description afterwards. So please do yourself a favour and check the description to see what was pulled out of the hat today, if you feel like there may be anything at all that could affect you negatively. These are articles that they've taken my notice while I've been researching other projects. So anything could come out. Alright, in saying that, we'll get on with this. What have we got? Long one. The Dundee, Perth and Cooper Advertiser for the 18th of October, 1853. We'll see what it has for us today. Now, we've already seen that there are articles in here that have attracted my attention while I was doing the gender fluidity in Scottish history research for Independence Live. And from the title of this one, I'm going to assume that it's something of that ilk. So the title is Extraordinary Application, a Female Husband. It reads, at the Westminster Police Court on Tuesday, a quiet-looking elderly woman solicited the magistrate's assistance under the following circumstances. Applicant complained that her daughter, a girl of 17, had gone through the ceremony of marriage without being blessed with a husband. It was, of course, at the time of the nuptials, supposed that she was being united to one of the other sex, and they went to York to spend the honeymoon. But her daughter, to her great surprise, discovered that she had been married to a woman in male attire, and the mother of 3 children. Mr. Broderick observed that there was such a case in the books, legal reports, and inquired where the marriage took place. Applicant replied at Highgate Church. Mr. Broderick referred her to the magistrate of that district. Applicant, before leaving the court, made the following extraordinary statement in the waiting room. The pseudo-husband was first introduced to her in female attire, under the name of Mrs. Panton, but after an intimacy of some months, suddenly appeared in the costume of a gentleman, announcing himself as Mr. Albert Guelph, and declaring that he was issue of George IV and Queen Caroline. but that from certain reasons his existence had hitherto been kept a profound secret, and that his love for her fair daughter had wrung it from his heart, and induced him to appear in the becoming habiliments of his own sex, in lieu of the feminine attire he had been disguised in for years, by directions of a very benign old lady who met him periodically in Park Lane, and supplied him with cash ad libitum, as he dressed very fashionably, and always had plenty of money. Applicant, believing the story, consented to their nuptials, particularly as the soi-disant Mrs. Panton and her daughter had, upon the occasion of little visits, slept together before. And so Miss Robbins changed her name for Mrs. Guelph on the 12th of September 1852, by licence at Highgate Church, but alas, soon discovered that Mrs. Panton was but a woman after all, although endeavours were made for a considerable time to induce a contrary notion. Okay. There is stated that there was an intimacy of several months. Now, in the language of the 19th century, that really could just be a description of friendly intimacy. And you would have people of the same sex sleeping in beds together all the time. I mean, if you worked as a farmhand or maybe as a server in a kind of publican establishment or a large inn or something, sometimes your boarding was part of the job. You got your boarding, a roof over your head, as well as whatever monies you were earning. And often you would find that you didn't get a bed to yourself. You would be sharing a bed with other servants or employees of the same sex. So it's not strange that this woman allowed her daughter and a female friend to sleep together. It was common. I mean, you had men, straight men, would link arms or hold hands walking down the street and things. They were very chummy. People were very close to their friends. There wasn't the kind of weird stigma that you get now, despite the fact that homosexuality was particularly frowned upon until fairly recently. It still wasn't uncommon, and there were a lot of lesbian relationships that succeeded and went unnoticed under the guise that the women had grown old together as companions to each other, spinsters that were just looking for friendship and company to ease the loneliness that they might be experiencing otherwise. So it wasn't strange at all. But that this woman, the daughter, has been able to get so close to her female friend, because remember, of course, this person claimed to be pretending to be a female, and then not come to the realization that she just was a woman, that she was the female friend she thought that she had made. That this person was able to come back dressed as a man and be able to somehow convince her that he had been a man all along is very puzzling to me. I'm not sure, and I'm wondering if they did grow close, but in a lesbian relationship, that this daughter knew fully that it was a woman that she was going to be marrying in this church, but that somehow made it official, and for her partner to take the guise of a man would appease the mother so that she would somehow give her sanction for the relationship. I'm not sure, because it's saying that after the first night of marriage, was it the first night? That she had made it known to... Yeah, it was during the honeymoon, so not necessarily, but at some point during this short amount of time after the wedding, she's apparently discovered that her husband is the female she thought her to be, also the mother of 3 children. Where were the children? Who was looking after her children? And for her to then extend the lie to the point where she's claiming to be a prince, literally the offspring, the legitimate offspring of the king and his wife. I mean, it's like these people that scam folk into relationships in order to take money from them by claiming that they're in the CIA, or they're in the special forces, or that there's a reason that they can't give answers to certain questions because it's got to be kept quiet, it's for the national security. The idea that people would believe these things without any kind of critical thought of the matter, I feel like the mother in this case has been the one that's bought the lie about being the offspring of the king and queen, that she's gone, oh my god, yeah, you've got to marry him now, you know, he's got money, look how well he dresses, plus he's probably royalty, you could have like a royal child, you know. There's always that possibility. But I cannot believe that the daughter married the woman without already knowing. I can't believe that she fully bought that it was a man she was marrying. But who can tell? It doesn't really give us more than I read there. So, hey, okay, on to the next. We have the Aberdeen Press and Journal for the 19th of December 1866. See what the Aberdeen Press and Journal has for us. Okay, alright, so we've got one of these articles with titles that don't really give much away, but certainly have us intrigued. We have Startling and Strange Occurrence. Some important discoveries of Roman remains were made at Lydney in Gloucestershire not long ago, and involved a very curious incident. Among the remains of a temple dedicated to the god Nodin found there was a brass plate on which was an inscription offering a reward for a ring, and stating that in the event of its being found, some portion of money would be dedicated to the god Nodin, but that if any persons who found it failed to restore it to the owner, the curse of Nodin would be upon him. Most singular to say, a ring corresponding with the lost one and bearing the name of the person offering the reward has been found at Silchester. What are the chances of that? Do we think they were found at the time and then lost again? Silchester. I'm not sure how close Silchester is to Lydney. Are they both in Gloucestershire? I have no idea. It'd be interesting to find out just how far away those places were to each other, because that is quite the coincidence. I mean, Startling and Strange Occurrence doesn't really cover how much of a sheer coincidence that is. I assume it was found by different people, like maybe different archaeologists, or... I mean, it could be, as with most archaeological finds, a farmer just tilling his fields and has come across a thing. But that's quite incredible. That's really incredible. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. That's pretty amazing. Have another one. I wonder if that's exhibited anywhere. The plaque and the ring together. I'll have to find out, see what I can find out afterwards. We next have The Scotsman for the 4th of January 1866. Another 1866. That's also a coincidence. We'll see what this has for us. Okay, so this looks like it's come from the research I was doing on Scottish Railway incidents. We've published 2 of 4 books for that series, but I believe this one's going to be an English accident, which is why it hasn't made it into the main project. The title here is Exciting Race of a Runaway Engine, Daring Act of a Fireman. About 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, the wires flashed the astounding intelligence to the authorities at the central station, Newcastle, that engine number 302 was then tearing along the down line at tremendous speed without anyone upon it. The consternation of all parties was immense, as it was at once concluded that the unrestrained race of the locomotive must result in causing considerable damage at some portion of the line. From inquiries we have made, it appears that the engine was standing with a ballast train at Durham, only the fireman being on it, the driver standing on the ground near. While thus standing, number 392 was run into by another engine. The shock detached the ballast engine from the train, threw open the regulator and pitched the fireman upon the ground. The result of the regulator being open was that number 392 came away at a gradually increasing rate of speed, meeting no impediment to its progress. The engine ran on at a great pace. The passengers on the platform at Lurnside Station were startled by the guideless engine rushing past, and the wildest conjectures were of course indulged in as to the strange occurrence. It is usual to slacken speed in approaching and crossing Victoria Bridge, and when the engine came rushing on with unchecked speed, the company's servants at Washington at once saw there was something wrong. At this station an engine was standing, the driver of which is named Ralph Gilchrist. He at once saw that the engine was a runaway, and detaching his engine from the train, he followed as fast as he could. It was after a long and exciting race, the runaway going at a speed estimated at 60 miles an hour, that Gilchrist only succeeded in ranging up alongside of it at Washhouse Lane, about half a mile outside of Gateshead. As soon as this was effected, the fireman John Batty, in the most courageous manner, and at the risk of his own life, jumped from his own engine onto the number 392 and succeeded in bringing it up. Fortunately, without any damage being done, as must have been the case had Gilchrist and Batty not succeeded in their pursuit. It was intended by the company's servants at Gateshead, in case the engine should reach that station without being stopped, to open the switches and run it among some empty wagons in the goods yard, but fortunately it was not necessary to carry this plan out. Oh! Okay. That would have made the most crazy scene in a movie. That this was real life, that there were people literally willing to risk their lives in this way, and you have to understand, this is 1866. The railway incidents that we covered started at 1900, and there was no health and safety, and deaths were an almost daily occurrence. It was crazy, the amount of people that were dying on the railway lines. I would think the majority of people alive now in Britain are going to have an ancestor, some relative that had an incident on the railways, because it was just happening all the time. Every day there was some new thing, some new crazy accident, or some new death or mutilation, or honestly, like, the railways were one of the most dangerous places up until, I mean, even now, even with all the safety in place, like, you still hear about people getting caught in the lines, but oh my words, like, these people actually tempted death with what they were doing, jumping from trains, oh my word. But you know what? It worked. And they may even have saved lives, ultimately. I understand they had put a kind of option in place. They'd put the lines out. They were prepared for this train arriving. Even in 1866, the information could be spread so fast amongst the railways. In one of the last articles for our first book, so we're talking between 1900 and 1904, they're talking about wireless telephones being used amongst the trains, which was just crazy. But they knew that train was going to arrive at this day, and they were prepared for it. You know, they were going to open the lines and let it just smash into empty wagons in a bid to slow it and stop it in a way that wasn't going to, well, kill people or have it smashing into another train on the line. Absolutely crazy. And that would have cost a lot of money initially anyway, because I think it was begun because another train had crashed into it in the first place. Yeah, absolutely crazy. Firemen, drivers, shunters, those people deserved the highest danger pay, like, out of anyone, really. Like, that was so dangerous. Yeah, that article is really something. I would love to see that played out, but in a movie, you know, not in real life. That would be terrifying to witness. But there we go. But yeah, like I thought, it was an English article, which is why it didn't make it into the Scottish project. It's happening all the time, telling you. I'll have a last. We've got the Brecon Advertiser for the 11th of February 1879. Let's see what the Brecon Advertiser has for us. Okay, so the Brecon Advertiser has singular incident for us. Could be anything, really. There died last week at 25 Rue Trezel, Paris, a lady whose decease was duly and legally attested. The funeral was fixed for Sunday afternoon, and when the hour arrived, the undertaker made his appearance, and was placing the corpse in the coffin, when suddenly one of his assistants exclaimed that the body was warm. At the same moment, the lady moved. Her eyes opened slowly, and regarded with a stupefied expression those who were standing around. The police were immediately apprised of the strange occurrence, and several doctors hurried in, hastily summoned. It was quite true, the lady was really alive, but the saddest part of the story is that she was only temporarily snatched from the grave, and actually expired at the end of a few hours. Perhaps the shock in discovering her awful situation had proved too much for her enfeebled constitution. The funeral, after all, was only postponed for a day, and took place on Monday morning in presence of the police. There's a few of those instances. Few people not quite making it into their grave before alerting folk that they weren't ready to be buried. I think there was a competition set up amongst the medical and scientific communities to ascertain the best way to fully and conclusively ascertain that death had occurred to a person. You have to imagine that back in the day, without all of the gadgets that we have now to be able to tell if there's any electrical activity going on in the brain, if there's any action of the heart, like even a weak pulse might go missed, that there have to be so many people in comas that were buried because people are like, well, he's not moved, not really breathing that we can tell, he's not, for days maybe, and they've just gone, he's definitely passed, when it was just a coma. This had happened so often, and you hear of bodies being exhumed and the nails having been destroyed with obvious scratch marks on the inside of their coffins and caskets, and what a terrifying thing. They used to, or at least there's a patent that can be found for a bell with a line that went into the coffin, so that if you were particularly fearful of being buried alive, which was a valid fear to hold, that was no phobia, it was a valid fear to have, that they could insist upon being buried with one of these contraptions so that they could alert people to the outside that they needed dug up, that they needed rescuing, basically. And autopsies weren't super common if there was no reason to think that a death hadn't been merited, that it hadn't been of natural causes or accident or injury. Then an autopsy wouldn't be done. If there was no mystery surrounding your death, or apparently no mystery surrounding your death, no dubiousness, there wouldn't be an autopsy. So that in itself would alert them to the fact you were alive. If you still had blood flow, that would alert them to the fact you were alive. There are still stories these days of people waking up on the autopsy table. And again, not such a phobia. When you hear that it still happens occasionally, you can't fault people for holding that as their fears. So that's a shame for this woman. It's a shame that she's come around only to be taken again so quickly. There was no ability for anyone to make it better for her. That maybe they're right, that the fright in itself has helped her kind of towards her end. Yeah. Again, not uncommon. Come across a few of these articles. I don't take notice of them all because that would make a whole project in itself, really. Something of a morbid project. But then the railways incidents was definitely a morbid project to have got into. Doesn't stop it from being interesting. So on that note, I shall love you and leave you. Thank you very much for tuning in again to another newspaper article Lucky Dip, and we may see you for the next one. Take care. Nee? You're just going to sit there and meow at us? Yeah, no, gorgeous. What's up, my boy? What you after? Me? What could you be after? Me? You just want all the attention. A little bit. Oh, darling. Sorry, let me remove that for you. Here you go.